Hi, my name is Brendan Perry, and this is my assignment on gender bias for EED 550 at Jacksonville State University. This is just a little bio about me for anyone who may watch this presentation. Once again, my name is Brendan Perry. I plugged in a little photo of me there for you to see. It was just a photo I took in one of my favorite places on earth, New York City. And that way you can kind of know who was talking to you and navigating you through this assignment. Just a little bit about me. I'm a second grade teacher at John Jones Elementary School in Rainbow City. I have a bachelor's degree from Jacksonville State in early childhood and elementary education. And I am also pursuing a master's degree from Jacksonville in elementary education. This presentation is being presented as an assignment for summer 2022 EED 550 Diversity in Today's Classroom. Just a disclaimer about that assignment, and then also if I cough or clear my throat, I've just got a little bit of allergies going on, so that's just a heads up on that. Okay, let's move on and dive into the topic. So, what is gender? Gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. So what that means is basically that society has constructed these values, this set of expectation, these norms, as you'll see in just a moment, for men and women to abide by what might be normal behavior. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles that are associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. And that, of course, comes from the World Health Organization, um, that definition there. And, I think we are in a period of time now where there is a major reckoning on gender norms and just society expectations for who you should be as a man or a woman, especially as we've seen with the movements and over the last 15 to 20 years with the LGBTQ community and those groups associated with them. You see that there's a lot of change going on, and we're just in one of those time periods where people are becoming more awakened to their sense that they don't have to abide by the necessary constructs that society has outlined for them. So the first section we're going to do is gender roles in American society. So if we go back to that previous slide, we'll see that it said that those gender roles and those expectations, those norms can change from society to society, from culture to culture. So really, I wanted to give a good definition of what a gender role, give you a good idea of what a gender role might be for men and for women, for boys and for girls, in American society specifically. So at first, let's understand masculinity. Masculine features are those typically associated with the male gender. Masculinity can be measured by a man's independence, assertiveness, leadership, self-reliance, and emotional stability. Most of a man's early life is spent continually demonstrating and proving his masculinity through his physical appearance, actions, or both. And that bullet point there is really, from my experience as a man and as a male in our society who wanted to prove that he was masculine or wanted to prove that like to the elders, whether it be of a church or to your own father or to an older brother or grandfather, whatever figure that you join the brotherhood of being a man, that you're masculine enough. And that also the same things apply when it comes to getting married and showing that you're masculine enough to your father-in-law. So all of these things, like it said, there's a measure of independence and assertiveness and leadership and self-reliance and emotional stability. All these things that we think in our head that a masculine man needs to be able to succeed and lead a family the right way. Unfortunately, you have people that, of course, take those norms and those expectations to the extreme. And those people and that behavior is known as toxic masculinity. And that can be used when you're describing a male who submits to abuse, manipulation, or violence in order to prove his masculine features and worth. And a lot of times, those men that behave in that way don't feel that they have self-worth. They struggle with their identity, and they may result to that behavior in order to cover up or to um, um, mask the fact that they have some feminine features inside that they may have been ashamed of, may have been shamed by someone, or they feel ashamed of themselves. So once we understand masculinity, it's equally as important to understand femininity. Feminine features are those associated with the female gender. Femininity can be measured by a woman's dependence, emotion, compliance, ability to empathize, and nurture. Typically, females are allowed to be more flexible in their gender identification than men. Um, as you think about a girl that may not have all of those traits, especially as she's growing up, um, many people will say, oh, she's a tomboy, quote unquote, a tomboy. They don't jump immediately to say she's a lesbian. They give her the title tomboy first, just to show that she's not interested in the typical girl norm, the typical stereotypical things that girls would be interested in. Women are often tracked into fields such as nursing, teaching, or social services because of the nurturing aspect of the feminine identity, which means basically you should be a mother, which means that you should also be good at these jobs. And that's not always the case for women that want to do these jobs. That's a great thing. They may have a gift for it or a calling for it. But at the same time, women shouldn't be projected into these roles just because they're a woman. This is a quote from the textbook that I found on page 108. Few people fall solely at one or the other end of the feminine masculine continuum. Most of us are androgynous in that we possess some characteristics of both femininity and masculinity. So basically, that's meaning that it's a sliding scale. We all possess things that, though I'm a man, I may be empathetic, or I may be nurturing, or a woman may be independent. Those things aren't exclusive to just those two genders. And just because we are those genders does not mean that we can't bleed over into one another. So since this is a course about education, I've tried to gear this into what does this look like in the classroom? So I've given some examples as a child develops for both a boy and a girl, and how they may be expected to act, respond, um, um, and as they mature, how that might look differently for each of the genders. So for the masculinity for the boy, young boys in early childhood, the masculine norm might be for them to choose to play with other boys. While playing with other boys, it might be assumed that the masculine choice would be for the boys to play with blocks, trucks, bugs, or dirt. And just like we had the tomboy label earlier that I mentioned, also around this time is when parents a lot of times say, he's all boy, which means that he's fulfilling all the expectations of what they have constructed in their mind of what a boy should be. Then for middle-aged boys, so probably about 4th grade to 8th grade, the masculine norm might be for them to be interested in sports and other physical activities. They would be expected to increase their athletic ability or other performance-based tasks such as hunting, fishing, different things like that. They would probably, we'll talk about this in just a minute, but probably teased or asked, have you got yourself a girlfriend? Things like that, encouraging that sexual growth and that leaning towards the sexual relationships that come on later in life. For older boys, high school to early adulthood, the masculine norm would be for them to be athletic, physically strong, consistently interested in females and sexual relationships. I know from the male perspective, especially, that um, older men, especially, try to live vicariously through the younger men and put a notion in their head that they should constantly be chasing girls and not to settle for just one at first. And that's the typical route that most men take because of the pressure that they feel. And I feel like um, between friends or brothers, family, older men that are around, a lot of younger men make bad choices and bad decisions just because they're pressured into thinking what a man should do at that age. For the feminine traits for a young girl, especially in early childhood, the feminine norm might be for them to choose to play with other girls. While playing with other girls, it might be assumed that the feminine choice would be for the girls to play with baby dolls or to have tea parties. And this is also where um, fathers may say, "You're daddy's little princess," and to encourage that thought that um, uh, of imaginary play, of them being the apple of their dad's eye. For middle-aged girls, the feminine norm might be for them to begin experimenting with makeup or other beauty products. Girls might be interested in having their ears pierced for the first time or becoming more concerned with their clothes and their fashion and there's just their general appearance. And this is where maybe mothers and grandmothers and friends and pop culture really begins to press onto the females where they feel pressured to look a certain way. For older girls, this is once again late teenager into early college. The feminine norm would be for them to be interested in boys, fashion, shopping, pop culture, and then future planning, of course, such as college, weddings, marriage, and etc. Those are typically the things that society presses into our minds that as a man, you should do A, B, and C, and as a woman, you should do A, B, and C. All right, let's move into the second. Now we've got a better understanding of what gender norms and the expectations and the constructs might be in America. Let's move on to gender bias in American society, specifically in our classrooms. So, what is bias? It's the action of supporting or opposing a particular person or thing in an unfair way because of allowing personal opinions to influence your judgment. Um, that's the hardest thing to swallow, I think, as an educator, is that we all have bias. And whether we recognize it or not, whether we want to recognize it or not, they're there. And whether that be from past hurt, that a certain demographic of person hurt you, or whether you um, were taught as a young child a certain thing about a certain group of people, those bias are there. And as an educator, it's important for us to recognize those and learn how to suppress those and to even heal those so that those aren't present anymore. All right, so I've inserted this chart here, which is the fight for equality for women. And as our textbook said, until the early 20th century, um, as our chart starts around 1920, our culture, which derived from a European society, it was patriarchal in that men controlled all the institutions, including family, and had all of the rights to vote, the rights to own property, all of those things the man carried out in the family. So you'll see in 1920 that the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, was ratified. And then in 1923, the ERA was introduced in Congress. And 1964, the Civil Rights Act. 1965, the Supreme Court decriminalizes the use of birth control by married couples. 1972, Congress passed the ERA. So from 1923 to 1972, that ERA was in constant protest and discussion and rebuttal. The Supreme Court in 1973 made abortion legal with the case Roe versus Wade. And then, of course, as we see later down in the timeline, this year, just 2 weeks ago, Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, which was 49 years that women had that right to an abortion in the first and second trimesters. If you look at 1981, women were allowed to enlist in all military branches for the first time. In 1982, the ERA was defeated during the state ratification process, so that means that the states did not garner enough votes to ratify and to put that into our Constitution. So it was dead from, it began in 1923 and died in 1982. And then in 2020, Senator Kamala Harris becomes the first woman to occupy the office of Vice President of the United States. And then, of course, once again, we have that in 2022, that Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. So as we look at the fight for equality for women, we have to know that that bleeds over into our classrooms and specifically into our teachers. And so this chart, which comes directly from our textbook, shows in gray men who are involved in those positions and those educational jobs, and women who are involved in those jobs. If you look specifically at the gray bars, you see that they consistently move up throughout the chart. And then if you look at the lime green color, which represents women, women consistently decrease throughout the chart. So especially in early childhood, women and elementary schools, women dominate that field. So you see that they have 95%, they are 95% women in pre-K and kindergarten teachers. And then that's a good majority share as well for elementary principals. Elementary principals dominate 65% of the educational job category for their position. But then as we move up into older children, we see that men begin to take the lead, which also is a construct of gender norm, that men shouldn't work with young children, and that as they get older, then men can tolerate them because they don't need to be nurtured as much, which is a feminine characteristic. And me personally, as a man in the elementary education field in the classroom every day, there are people who truly believe that I should not be teaching second grade, that men shouldn't be in that position, that the children are too young, that there's that I may not do the job of a woman. And so, though most of the time the bias is against females, there are opportunities and circumstances where the bias is towards men. So, as mentioned before, women are more likely to join the teaching field, especially while teaching or leading in the early childhood field. So, how might gender bias affect the classroom? Well, teachers tend to pay more attention to boys, according to research through our textbook, than girls by having more interactions with them. So they tolerate behavior in boys that is not tolerated in girls, and tend to provide boys with more criticism and praise. Our book also said that gender representation in textbooks was swayed, that women were shown in a negative light or in a misleading light. And then the last point were that boys are still more likely to enroll in math, science, and engineering than girls, and are more likely to take advanced courses in those subject areas. So how do we fix the issue? Well, this is a roadmap that I've constructed for just a few thoughts and solutions of how to fix it. So as educators, we must identify and acknowledge any biases that we may have. That may be hard to do, but we need to do it. We need to treat both sexes fairly with non-sexist education, and include a positive and accurate representation of women in the curriculum. We need to create opportunities for students of both genders to provide feedback on how they feel in the classroom environment. Also, we need to make sure that we put equity over equality, and gender-conscious education does not require that both genders be treated the same. You just provide for the needs, and you treat them fairly in the situations that they may be in. Ignore number 5, that is a typo. Number 6, become an ally for all students, not just for one group in the classroom. That is so easy to do, especially when you may see yourself in a group of students. I know that I have done that before. Thank you for listening. I hope that I have enlightened you on the situation of gender bias in the elementary classroom and the classroom in general. These are my references. If you need any contact information, you may contact me at bperry1@stu.jsu.edu. Thank you.